All right. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Jared Cattoor here from Kung Fu Music Lessons, Two Cities, One World. Today, I'm here with the great Jody Fisher. Hello, Jody, and thank you so much for joining me. I just had an amazing lesson with Jody as well. He has shown me some very, very cool things. And Jody is definitely a master musician. So if you guys aren't aware already, get his books. He's got tons of books out. He's got amazing original music. And there's just so much cool things that he's done. So dig in. So thanks
Thank you,
so much.
Jared. It's my pleasure, really.
Great, man. So first, before we ask some in-depth questions, can you just give a little background from you? Like, when did you actually start playing music? And just a little, just a sequence of from the beginning until now, if you can.
Okay. Basically, I mean, it's kind of a strange beginning. I remember being about 4 years old, knowing I was going to end up doing this. It was kind of funny. I was looking through a toy catalog, and I was really little, and there was a picture of a guitar, and it just struck me. It was kind of like I got my marching orders, right? So about 4 years later, my father comes back from a business trip, and he brings me a ukulele and my brother, and never left my arms. I played ukulele like constantly for about 4 years. And my brother and I would perform here and there. My father was in the radio business, and so he had a lot of opportunities to expose us to show business, right? And so there'd be a grand opening of a hardware store, and we'd play for it or something. You know? And so there's that. I took my first guitar lesson when I was 11. One of my most influential teachers was my uncle, who was a professional player out of the Chicago area for most of his life. And he was RCA Records. He had done quite a lot, actually, in the business. He had retired right around the time I was born. He rediscovered guitar when I started playing guitar. And then, in addition to my regular teacher, he would teach me quite a lot. He was a great player, sort of in the school of, sort of a cross between Les Paul and maybe Barney Kessel, you know, kind of that. Wow. And then we moved from that area, that was the Chicago area, moved to California. My parents were very supportive, and they drove me around to lessons with everybody pretty much, you know, from the LA studio scene. And they sent me to music camps, went to the Stan Kenton music clinics back in the mid-'60s. Nobody was really doing that sort of thing then, but I was very fortunate to have that in my experience. Then I had a teacher in Southern California who played 7 nights a week, and he'd start bringing me to the gigs. You know, so literally I started playing in bars around 13 or 14 years old. I'm not well, mind you, but I was playing in bars. And so I played with his group, and they just teach me things. And I would either sink or swim, you know, mostly sink. But then the more times I did it, I would start to swim a little bit. And by the time I was in high school, they said you can come in and sit in anytime you want. So that was sort of my entrance into the business. Went off on my own. I was about 18, and I've been supporting myself playing guitar since I was about 18. So
wow. But so you, that's amazing, all that. So so you think you really started around 8? Is that correct?
Well, ukulele, yeah, you know, and that, you know what I mean. I'm saying.
But you already had like some kind of passion or desire for music, even from 4.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I come from an artistic family. My mother was an actress. My father was in the radio broadcasting all his life, and so we were surrounded with it, you know, with music and art and radio and, you know, things like that.
So after 18, what continued to happen? Because I know you're teaching now, right, at university. And how long have you been teaching there?
Oh, at the university?
Yeah.
Well, I teach at two colleges, actually. I teach at the University of Redlands in Redlands, California. And I also see some private students at Riverside Community College, which isn't far, you know. So those are my 2 main teaching gigs these days, okay? But I started teaching when I was about 16 because I got my driver's license, you know, and I got a car, and my dad goes, well, now you got to pay for this thing, right? So he said, you have to get a job. And in his mind, he's thinking of like working at a gas station, a grocery store, something like that. So I walked into this music store, and there was an elderly couple that ran this little music store. I said, I'm a guitar teacher, I'm looking for a job. And they said, well, we have a nice young man here who's teaching, but if he ever leaves, we'll call you, give us your number. So, and this kid was also the other teacher was also college or high school or something. And so the next day I come home from school, and my mom said, these people from Musicland called, and they said, call them right back. So I called him back. Turns out the other teacher's father made him quit teaching because he was flunking out of school, right? And the people at the store said, if you can make it in a half hour, you've got all of the students, you've got 40 of them, right? So my first teaching job, I walked right in. These are 40 half-hour students a week, right? And the store charged $3 for the lesson. I got to keep 2 of them. And but for a high school kid, like $80 a week wasn't too bad. So I thought, this is my job. My dad goes, that's your job? And so it turned out. But so I've been teaching since I was about 16. University of Redlands, I just came back to after about a 30-year break. Taught there through the 80s. And then I was just getting a lot of road work and touring a lot and stuff. And so I left all teaching for a while. And I started back at the University of Redlands maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Wow. So that's amazing. When did you start writing original music? Just curious.
I've always had a real interest in it, but quite honestly, my work has never given me a chance to really develop it. Okay. I mean, I have a family, I've had kids, I have mouths to feed, and so for me, for a lot of my career really has been filling up the calendar, just darkening the calendar, right? So I was playing, like a lot of, some jazz gigs, but a lot of commercial gigs, a lot of cocktail parties, corporate events, backed up a lot of celebrities. I live very close to the Palm Springs, California area. And so most of the artists that tour and go through LA and San Diego will also make a stop in Palm Springs. So I was getting a lot of those calls, as well. And so most of my time was freelance, okay? And that was during the winter months, generally. Then during the summer, I would travel for the National Guitar Workshop as a clinician or as a director sometimes. And so I was really busy 12 months of the year. I was, just cranking. I always had 3 or 4 projects going, whether they were books or videos or gigs or whatever, And so to do what I wanted to do musically was just not in the cards at all. And, but I was making money, raising a family, and that was the top priority. And now everybody's grown up and on their own, and so these are the days I've written the most music. There's a bunch of them up on my YouTube channel, but that's my main priority, at this point now. So, I'm doing the teaching thing and writing music, and that's primarily my main activities these days.
Yeah, your music is very beautiful. I was listening. I've been listening a lot lately, but today, to prepare my ears, I listened to on your Spotify channel, and I just put all the videos on YouTube on autoplay.
Thank you. So you're the guy. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's really wonderful. Really beautiful stuff. Amazing. And one thing I was like in the Kung Fu program that I think is important is I tell everybody the cycle to learn fastest is to teach. It's like you must be if you're the teacher and the student at the same time. It's like the fastest way to grow. So you've been teaching and studying since, before, but teaching as well since 16 the whole time.
Yeah.
So how do you think that has helped your development?
Oh, well, I learn a lot more from my students than they learn from me. I mean, really by far. It's kind of a cliche, but it's so true. It's so true.
Can you share anything specific that sticks out that you could remember? Like, okay, that was a cool moment with this student, or
It's not no, I don't think it'd be that specific. It's more like they'll ask a question which shows me that they're looking at the topic from a different angle that I never considered before. It's more like that, Or if there's a topic that and you have to explain it 5 different ways to 5 different people, okay? It really cements that knowledge in yourself, as well. And I think, a lot of us, practice alone, and we study alone, and we do all of this. And so, your music can become fairly one-dimensional that way, And so I kind of look to my students to look at these things from a different perspective, And you have to teach every student completely differently. When I first started, I'd have these methods I would make, and try to squish everybody through the method, right? And it just doesn't work that way. You have to treat everybody as an individual, and focus on their strengths. You can work on the weaknesses too, but focus on the strengths. And sometimes that will elevate the weaknesses all by itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a player first. I've always been a player first. The IRS will tell you that. Okay? But I love teaching equally, quite honestly. It's a different dynamic. You can walk out of a gig and go, wow, what a crummy gig, right? But you walk out of a lesson, and it's kind of like, it's almost always fulfilling.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, one thing I think is so important for any teacher to be aware of is that the least there's this might be too scientific, but I'm just saying that not scientific really, but the different learning methods, right? You have like kinesthetic learners, you have audio or visual, you have audio, and I think teaching music is a good practice to, like you just said, like understand the individual, but really see that we really have to cater to all those ways. And as a teacher, you have to be able to explain things from all those perspectives.
Absolutely.
Creates an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said too, you don't have to think in that way, just getting to know the person or however they work. But I also want to ask you in terms of teaching, you've released a lot of educational materials. And you were talking about this before. But can you talk a little about that? Like you said you were working with was it Alfred, right?
Alfred Publishing is the main publisher I've worked with through the years. There's been others. I've worked for Mel Bay and Center Stream and a few others, but by far the lion's share of work has been with Alfred.
How many books or CDs or materials do you think you've published?
I've kind of lost track, but I think it's about 40 books, 40 titles. I've done about, I don't know, 8 or 10 full-length videos, hour-long videos. I've done almost a couple hundred short snippet videos, instructional things, for a company that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But there's still a lot of them out there, So between, videos, short and long, and books, there's a lot of product out there. There's a lot.
There's a lot, that's for sure. And I was telling you, of course, guys, we've been working with the Rhythm Encyclopedia that Jody has, which is very cool. He's explaining some things, so I would definitely recommend getting that. But also from your perspective, what are some of your favorite books that you've published, or maybe books that you would highly recommend? I'm sure all of them, but
oh boy, I'm a little more comfortable telling you about books that are important to me that I didn't write.
Okay, please share.
But I can give you a survey of some of my stuff. But as far as I think some of the most valuable books ever written for guitarists, I obviously have to say Ted Green's books, most specifically Modern Chord Progressions, Volume 1. All those other books are really good, but I think every guitar player should have that one. I think Mick Goodrick's book, The Advancing Guitarist, may be one of the best guitar books ever written, period.
I have this book. It's very cool.
It's just really great. It's got a great vibe, and he lets you kind of engineer your own course, and he just makes suggestions, and then you carry the ball from there. And I think that's a good book. Another great book is George Van Eps's first book, Modern Chord Progression, which I think came out around 1936, something like that. And I think that's a really important guitar book, as well. So as my books, it depends what you want, because there've been, a number of different avenues we've traveled down with Alfred Publishing in terms of what to write. I have some books that are actually encyclopedias, and they're not really good method books, but they're good for looking up things. There's a mode encyclopedia and a jazz lick encyclopedia and the rhythm guitar encyclopedia, like what you were mentioning. Then I have other just general jazz methods. For chord melody, there's one called Jody Fisher's Jazz Guitar Chord Melody Method. There's that. I have one called the Total Jazz Guitarist, and that encompasses more improvisational things as well as chordal, studies as well. It just depends what you want, to be honest with you. I wrote one book called I Used to Play Guitar, which is for adults that used to play guitar, and now they're coming back to it later in life. So it's kind of a brush up, kind of book. So there's been a lot of topics in a lot of different areas, almost all having to do with jazz guitar.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of those. Yeah, I definitely get some of those books, everyone. I'm already excited to get some myself from hearing that. But one thing I definitely want to ask about is you were talking to me before about how the importance of practice, or maybe different approaches to practicing or methods. And I want to ask you about this. What do you think, like what are must-dos, or just in general, whatever you want to say about this topic? But I want to also include that the whole idea of Kung Fu music lessons is about becoming a true music master. So in terms of true mastery, what do you suggest to be working on to stay on that route, and included with whatever you think about practice, that you recommend?
Well, the word mastery is pretty huge, okay? Yeah. And I'm not sure I would use that word myself, okay? Because to me, it's more about becoming than getting there. You know what I mean? Not do we really ever get there? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'll ever get there, but I enjoy the process of getting there, And so for jazz guitar students especially, I would divide everything up into 5 main areas. Okay, there's like single note playing and improvisation. There's harmony and chord vocabulary. There's technique. There's reading, and by far the most important is repertoire development. Okay, tunes are the main thing. Okay, so there's a lot of people out there that think, well, I'll get my chops together, I'll get my theory together, then I'll start learning tunes, and that's completely backwards. Your tunes, the songs you're working on, are the vehicles to learn your theory. Your vehicle to get your chops together. Theory really doesn't tell you how to play. It kind of more explains what you just finished playing. Right? Okay, so the idea is to learn a lot of tunes and get better that way. If you run into obstacles or how do I negotiate this chord change, that's the time to crack the theory books, right? And if there's something you can't play at tempo, work on your chops. But let the tunes you're playing dictate the things that you're really working on. Now that said, I don't think it's a good idea to work on all 5 things a day at all. I never work on more than 1 or 2 topics on any practice session, okay? What do you practice? It depends on your stage of life, I think. If you're doing the freelance thing, and you're playing with a country band one night and a high society band the other night and a rock trio the next night, okay, practice for your gig. That's what you should be practicing for. That's where you're going to be heard, and that's also where your next gig is going to come from. Right? So in order to keep the momentum going, that has to happen. But if you're in a place where you're comfortable with the work you're doing and you're practicing for your own music or for some other motivation, I think the world kind of tells you what to work on, right? If you were hired as a sideman the night before and every time a minor 7 flat 5 chord, came up, you played the same lick. And that's kind of like the universe telling you need more ideas for half diminished chords. Right? Or if the band leader called 5 tunes that you didn't know, okay, you better learn those tunes the next day, or if they call a tune in a key you're not comfortable with, that's what you work on, So real life determines practice, I think, in its most effective way, So I think that's really important. When it comes to getting started, the fundamentals are what you work on. You should work on reading. You should work on technique. You have to get your harmony together, your fingerboard knowledge together, all of these things so that you're ready for anything. And as a freelance person, which I've done most of my life, being ready for anything is what keeps you employed. If you're not dependent on money, or you don't play for a living, but you play as a serious avocation, then you have the luxury to work on whatever you want, whenever you want, because your money is coming from someplace else, right? But if you're a full-timer and you're playing for a living, practice for the gig, and make sure nothing's going to come your way that you can't handle. As far as how long to practice, that's different for all of us. I mean, sometimes, I basically practice all day. I mean, if I'm home, I mean, I take my guitar out in the morning, and most of my day is spent practicing. And it's always been that way. If I'm busy or it's a heavy teaching semester or something like that, I do the best I can. And at that point, it's mostly a matter of just keeping my hands in shape. More like calisthenics. So at least I may not be learning anything new, but I'm not getting worse. Your technique is either getting better or it's getting worse. It's never static. And so, I think that's really important to keep up. But at the same time, hours and hours and hours of exercises is not a smart idea either. You need musical application. And then what we mentioned earlier was I think you should leave 20 to 30 minutes at the end of your practice to do aimless noodling, okay? And just see what comes out influenced by what you just finished practicing. And that way you start using what you're learning instead of thinking that what you're getting out of this book is going to make you a guitar player, because it's not. It's your noodling. It's going to give you make that information seep in deeper, into your playing.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. That's really, really valuable stuff to take to heart, I think, for anyone. Very, how to be very practical. So that's really wonderful. So yeah, I'd like to ask now about some composition ideas, because you've been writing a lot more now, and your music is so beautiful. It's so amazing. I don't know, what do you have to say to people, I guess, about being, I want to say, in terms of being the artist, what I'm interested in helping people do is find their authentic voice, and how to get this out, and how to really bring music to life through their authenticity, through who they are. It's like, what am I saying with my music? So yeah, what are your thoughts about this, and what would you recommend, I don't know, to anyone else to really bring the music to life, but in their own true, authentic way, in their composition?
I'm not sure we have a choice in that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of people that they're a little lofty about it. You know what I mean? I see this beautiful sunset, and then all these musical ideas pour out of my head, or into my head, and I don't think that's the way it really works. I know a lot of people like that, and they don't write a lot. They don't produce a lot. I'm much more practical about it. If I'm writing something for myself to play or to record, the elements of music themselves is all the inspiration that I need. Okay, I mean, it can be an interval, right? Just two notes, right? It could be a chord. It could be a chord progression. It might be like a rhythmic motif of some kind, right? And that might begin the process, but it's not lofty at all. It's moving pieces around. Okay, I think the most important thing is to show up at the page every single day. Okay, and write, and just sit down and write. Don't worry about the quality either. That's the other thing. Okay, the surprising thing about this, it's about quantity, not quality. Okay, so if you sit down and write every day for a month, and you write 30 tunes, okay, out of those 32, maybe 2 of them will be decent, but you're not going to find those 2 until you've done the 30. You know what I'm saying? Okay, now these are not totally original ideas with me. I'm influenced by a lot of authors and, other people in different forms of art, quite honestly, but I think I think the main work is showing up, sit down and write, and it may be junk, and save it. The other thing too is, if you've written 8 bars, name it, give it a title, okay, because it makes it real. you know, and it's a real song. You may not like it, or maybe junk, but it's a real song, right? And it makes you feel like, yeah, I'm producing. Okay, so I think just sit down and get the work done, and the world will decide if it's any good, right? I mean, nobody's ever sat down to write a masterpiece. I mean, other people decide it's a masterpiece. You don't, right? So it's just a matter of putting it out there, and then letting go of it. Okay. Now that's when you're writing music for yourself. Now, I've also had to write a lot of music for other people and for my books, you know, and videos and things like this. And you don't have the luxury of, you know, really working it out. It's kind of like, okay, I got to knock out 5 pages for this book today, and one of those pages is an original song to exemplify a particular concept I'm trying to explain. Right? Well, okay, so you write the song and you kind of go, man, I could make this a whole lot better, but the deadline's coming. Turn the page, keep going, just keep going. Unless it's really awful, you know. But I mean, if it's, you know, when do you know the song's done? You really don't. You know, when does the artist know the picture is done, the painting is done? You really don't. You know, you decide to end it. And I think for commercial purposes, that skill, writing on demand, is a really important thing to do, to have in your repertoire of writing. When you're writing for yourself, it's a little different story, you know. But again, it's not about loftiness, it's about sweat. You know, I mean, I love and hate writing. Okay, I mean, I love it when it's done, you know, but boy, the process is painful. It hurts. You know, that's kind of where I'm at with that. You know,
That's awesome.
just sit down and do it, and don't think about it, talk about it.
Or judge yourself, which is also basically what you mentioned.
Well, judging yourself in terms of value, yeah, I agree with that. But you do have to make decisions in your writing. You know what I mean? This chord or this chord. You know what I mean? And you kind of have to commit. You know.
Mm.
And the good thing though is for every mistake in judgment you make like that, you've probably learned a whole lot. And so that's the thing. You know, I'm not looking for perfection. It's that's impossible. So you do the best you can and you put it out there. And if it has some flaws, and I don't mean in the performance, I'm talking about the writing. Okay, performance, I don't think people should put anything out there with mistakes. Okay, I mean, you get on Facebook, you know, and you know, here's my rendition of such and such, and sorry about the bloopers. Well, why would you ever upload that? I don't know. I don't get that. You know, so as far as performance, it should be as perfect as possible. You know, but the writing, it's a little different. It's kind of like making pottery. You know, I mean, if you buy a piece of pottery, there's something wrong with it. There's some flaw in it somewhere, right? Because a human being made it. They're never perfect, you know. And I think the same thing is true in music. I think it's a human being writing this, and it's an expression of that person in the moments that he wrote it, you know. And then when he's playing it, it's an expression of that moment, you know. But just do the best you can and put it out there, you know. That's the main thing.
That's nice. Yes, thank you. All right, so I have one final question. So I gotta take over baby duties.
Okay.
But I'm so happy.
Done that.
Yeah. But just the last to sum things up, I wish I had more time, but everything you've said has already been so valuable, really. So I'm so appreciative. But one last question is, if you have any advice for, you know, anyone who has the bug like you had at 4, you know, anyone who's been with the music bug, who knows they're going to play their whole life. I don't know, what kind of things would you have to say to them to keep them going in the right direction?
Well, it's a very different world now than it was when I started. I mean, you know, when I started and growing up years, I mean, you could find a gig fairly easily, and it was going to last 2 weeks to a month, right? And during that time, you look for your next gig, and so it was very possible, very viable way to make a living, playing every night of the week, right? These days, it's nothing like that at all. You know, I mean, even pre-quarantine, you know, I mean, it's those gigs just don't exist, you know. And so I think these days, and I certainly don't have the answer, but it seems to me that you need multiple streams to keep yourself in business in music now, you know. I mean, you're going to play. You're going to teach. Maybe you might write some magazine articles, some books, make some videos. Maybe you're going to be in 14 bands. I would say make sure you can do a solo gig. Okay, I can't tell you how many times through all these decades, the economy goes up and it goes down. If you play solo, you'll still work. And I think and it also makes your chops really strong. I think that's a valuable thing. So I think to diversify, and if you love to play in groups, get in as many groups as you can. If you're married to a particular style, realize that you're probably going to have to play a lot of styles. If you plan to do this for a living. But it's tough. I mean, I don't see where people are paying any more now than they did in the 1970s, in terms of restaurants and clubs. And that's pretty pathetic. I mean, that's crazy. So, these days it's mostly about teaching for most of us, I think. And I happen to like it, so that worked out, But if I think, there was a famous guitar player named Tony Rizzi. A lot of the LA guys who watch this will know who he was. And he gave me a bit of advice once, a long time ago. I was in my 20s. He goes, I know you want to play, I know you want to get out there and gig. He says, but concentrate on your teaching, because your reputation actually spreads faster that way. Right? How many people go to a club every night? Hardly anybody. Okay, but if you have a kid who has guitar lessons, and then they tell their friends and their parents, and they show up at your gigs, and teaching seems to spread the word a little faster than just playing in clubs every night. So that's what I would kind of advise, is just diversify and do the best you can. But it's not easy. It's a tough business.
Cool. I think that's a lot of great advice. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Jody. I'm going to have to exit here. But guys, everybody who's listening, make sure to check all of Jody's stuff, check his YouTube channel. Are you available for lessons too?
Oh, absolutely. I do a lot of online lessons. One thing that people should know, I just took down my website, okay, and I'm not probably putting up another one until sometime over the summer. It was kind of outdated and I didn't like it much anymore. And so I don't know what I want to do with it at this point. So the best thing to do, if you want to get a hold of me, if I can give my email, Jody @mac.com. Go to Jody @mac.com. And that's the website is dead at this point. So
okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, everyone dig in, check out his books, check out his music, contact him for lessons, whatever you want to do. Enjoy, and thank you so much, Jody.
Appreciate it.
All right.